Hmm.
If you have a question, raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone.
The Dharma is sometimes likened to a boat. Our practice is likened to a boat that's taking across the river of samsara. So we all have to figure out where we're going to take the boat this morning. So, your turn to paddle.
I have a question about the shamatha practice. Michael Flanagan asked about which book was good to read, and Zopa immediately answered the Daring Steps. And so it's like, yeah, that's a good book. and reviewing what I had heard before and going at it at a different way and deepening, great. And there was questions that arose from part of that, one of his instructions that he would loop around. And then last week you talked about the mind, I think it was last week with the Chenrezig, and you started with the 4 practices of mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And I could very well have heard wrong or taken it in wrong, but it sounded like starting with this mindfulness and then a next and the next and the next until it was the display of all of them. And I noticed when I sit and I'm I don't even want to use the word watching, aware of like the eye sensation or the sound or the other. But even if I'm looking at sight, I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And because my initial training in meditation, shamatha, was to not block anything, I don't block the hearing or the smell.
Good.
But so it seems like I always jump straight to the 5th one, or I lost count, of the display of all of them, but the focus might be a little stronger on one, but all the others are there. And so I'm wondering, am I supposed to be going in progression to develop a more stable practice, which stability is a goal for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's still out of reach most of the time.
Yeah. From the point of view of stability, then placing one aspect in the center of attention is the path. Noticing that other things arise, there are other. That's fine, but. And we don't need to, blocking is not part of the game. But allowing the mind to rest and settle into something, we can get off off kilter a little bit by saying, oh, I'm settling my mind on the domain of tactile sensation. Oh, that's a sound. And then we get in a very subtle way, intellectually wrapped up in, well, that's a sound as opposed to this other thing. But if we're just relaxing with vivid attention on the tactile sensation, that domain, then we don't have to have any kind of sticky relationship with whatever else that arises, whether it's labels, or sound or anything else that arises. We don't have a sticky relationship with it. We don't go. In the fourth foundation of mindfulness, and it's I think it's different ways. You can find it emphasized in different ways, but the simple. I go to kind of a simple thing that Alan Wallace points out in one of his guided meditations, which is just the open sense, not choosing a place to center the attention, not choosing a center of attention, but more a matter of being witness to the display that arises as attention and awareness moves, watching that display. So I think that it's easy. It's in a certain way, it's easy to go to the latter one, but it's hard. It's hard to do it without actually getting lost. That's the hard part, because the display is so. When we start, it's like an orchestra. You could say the tactile sensation is just the tuba. Kind of, and then by the time you get everything else going, we're dancing along with it. We're completely wrapped up, and determining whether or not we're having a good time, and whether the tuba player is in key or whatnot. So it's so easy to get wrapped up in that display. That's the nature of being wrapped up. It's very seductive. So being able to actually relax in the midst of that, if one can do it, that's great. But it's actually, I find it helpful to really settle into the thing that you will have a harder time doing in that just rest in the midst of the display, is actually coming to the point where you rest enough to actually meet any aspect of the experience in a way where you could start to look into the nature of it. That's harder. So being able to relax in the midst of the display, good. But to actually be able to check into, to use the kind of active insight practices where you're actually checking, is this like this or is it like that? Because our assumptions about how things are kind of crazy subtle. So it's easy to just not be able to settle enough so that those investigations can really happen in a very clear way.
When Ringu Tuku was describing part of it, where I was starting to get something was, it's paraphrasing, but it seemed like relaxing and being aware even before even the thought of what that was or the name. And it was like trying to get to that point. So it's more like supreme shamatha, I guess, than insight. But when you talked about the sticking relation, to me, and the relaxing on the focus, it sounded like it sounded close to my dilemma, which is the focus almost seems sticky, to use your word. Mm-hmm. And yeah. So that's a real fine line between sticky and relaxed focus.
Mm-hmm. But it's okay. we're in you could say one of the dirty little secrets of shamatha is that we're using the habitual tendencies of the mind as a support. So the fact that we can be sticky in relationship to anything that arises we'll use that. Okay. Let's kind of use that piece to allow us to settle with one thing. Then we just sort of relax about that. We're bringing into awareness the tendency to be sticky, you could say. It's sort of like, I'm doing this on purpose now. Right now, I'm going to do this on purpose. I'm going to be intentionally sticky about this particular domain of experience.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, please.
I think it's important to note that the 4 applications or foundations of mindfulness have both they cultivate both our shamatha, our calm abiding, and insight. So I don't know if it's technically, we'd say they're a bridge from shamatha to insight, or a combination, or I'm not quite sure what the correct way to phrase that would be, but both of those things are happening there. So that's an advantage, and it's much easier to make progress on, well, I'd say on maybe, anyway, by breaking things down, I think we do provide the possibility, an easier way to both advance shamatha and insight. There's just something very different in looking so closely at, and mindfulness of the body can be divided into many, many different things. Like you might do the different elements, looking at temperature and solidity, and those, like, one at a time. The breath is part of the body, so different modes of looking at the breath, and the sensations, different senses. So there's so many ways to parse it but by doing that, and what you say is very true, the thing of looking before labeling, it's just being as basic as possible on the actual experience, not some stuff we put on top of, oh, that's that, or that's that. Just exactly what can we just barely perceive that is happening. And that kind of looking, I think it's challenging to do when you're having I'm just going to be aware of everything that's going on kind of, that I think eventually we do want to have that level of awareness of everything, but that's a tall order. So I think you really can learn some things by breaking these things down. And I just recall there's something I read in a book, which, who knows, the Buddha said, and of course I can't remember how they said it, so now I'm going to make it worse, but it's more or less, the meaning of it was that enlightenment can be found in this very body. And so it's just, I feel like these, and that was said in the context of these, practices that, and so to me that's riveting, really, just the idea that, just look at exactly what we have and things will be revealed. So, thank you. And I love these practices. So just make a plug that we do have, I think, do we still have some CDs, Diane, in the bookstore? I think there were a few from Alan Wallace when he did a retreat here with us, the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness. We recorded the whole thing, but we condensed all of the guided meditations onto a CD, and it includes shamatha. Well, if we have anybody who'd like to copy some more CDs, we could have more of those. But anyway, it does exist, and those are, he does a great job of doing the guided meditations in these, which is the luxury mode of doing it. I thought, sit back and let him bring you there.
So I'm having a hard time trying to figure out exactly what I think is the right way to sort of get at what I'm thinking about, to ask this question. It's about shamatha and instructions and calm abiding practice. And I'll try it this way, and it dovetails a little bit maybe with how we started and what Cynthia asked. Is there a reason or an explanation for the fact that the shamatha instructions here, over time, especially this year, at least to me, seem to have changed? That there used to be much more of a focus on the breath. That was the basic instruction. And then Lama Michael sort of seemed to move towards a be aware of your experience as it arises instruction. A much more general, less specific focus. And maybe that's a misperception on my part, but is there a reason for that? And what is the reason?
You would have to ask him what his reason is. I'm not dodging the question, but you'd actually have to ask him.
Well, it seemed to me that your intro this morning was also sort of like be aware of your experience as it arises, but maybe I wasn't listening as closely as I should.
No, that was a piece of it, and then within that, I said the Buddhas have offered hints about how to ease into this, you could say, and to use the breath as a way to settle into this, because that's a valid piece of experience. You can't say it's not experience, so there you go. You have some experience to settle with. Lama Michael has been emphasizing the being with the unfolding of experience a lot more recently. I think it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago that I began introducing that a little bit, though not with the kind of sort of, it's an option here, now let's follow our breath. But it's, I think over time, it is important to be able to be with experience as it unfolds. And the breath can be kind of a 100% deal. It's not like, oh, that's the lesser thing. But if we have to be able to be with it in a very subtle way, to be with any piece of experience in this a very profound and subtle way, it's the same as any other doorway to what's profound. But most often we make a kind of a distinction. I'm being only with my breath. And then we jump to, and now I'm in the middle of life where everybody's shooting at me from every different side, and I have to run and duck and try to make all kinds of decisions, and that seems completely different. It's totally different. But the opening that's possible within being within the breath, being with the breath, is the same opening that's possible if we are with what Alan Wallace sometimes calls choiceless awareness, whatever is arising. So that's his term for it. But why Michael has been more explicit about it, he hasn't explained to me. But it's been very familiar to me, so I'm just kind of, okay, fine, cool. Is there, what's kind of behind, is there something behind your question?
Well, the bigger question for me, and you know, maybe it's just too big a question for this context. It sort of comes from the nugget of, you know, my original indoctrination at KCC to sort of Mahamudra practice, and the shamatha piece of it, you know, just in the weekend retreat, you know, to sort of start with the breath, you know, or 4 foundations, but then that would lead to sort of this shamatha without an object, which seems to me to be very similar to, you know, your experience as it arises. And I'm always wondering what that is supposed to be like, and if I am doing it right. And like what the distraction and the calm and what level of sort of like cyclic, like what's that supposed to be like? But then I also think of sort of my favorite instructions, which, you know, give up all hope of fruition, and maybe I should just stop worrying about it, right?
Yeah.
Just keep trying. But
yeah.
I don't want to waste my time, I guess.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. It's one thing that I would toss out. I'll just sort of throw it out, not so much as an answer, but it's just something. Well, consider this: that the more subtle the practice gets, the less we have to hold. The less useful it is to hold up any kind of yardstick at all. So at some point it's very, if we're saying, okay, I'm going to put the breath at the center of attention, then the yardstick of, am I paying attention to the breath or not, it's a useful yardstick. But it becomes less helpful as we go along to try to hold up yardsticks when it's more subtle and it's more spacious, and it's, you can say kind of, well, anything could show up in this space. What the heck's that about? That kind of questioning gets away from, unless we can actually treat the questioning itself and the doubt itself, the experience of the doubt, unless we can treat that as just exactly the same as a sense of it going good or a sense of it going bad, and now we have this sense of, I don't know whether the heck it's going good or bad, which is kind of like, and now there's the experience of frustration because I'd like to know it's either going good or bad. But that's just another thing that could be unfolding. But that one's much more challenging to think, oh, here I am, sitting with this experience of things neither going good, I can't tell if they're going good or bad. So it's,
I can say that for the most part, I seem to enjoy it. So I don't know.
So what are you complaining about, John?
So,
do you also enjoy the sense of frustration too? I get a perverse sense of satisfaction out there.
I get a sense of satisfaction about being able to say, hey, why are you worried about what the point is or whether you're doing it right? And if I can get that far, it's part of the joy.
Yeah.
If I get to the point where I let that go completely, I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
I don't know. Zopa or Dora, do you want to try to dig me out of any holes I've dug?
I don't know if you're in one. You might know. I also have observed your experience of when I came, what we were learning and doing together and shifting. And the way I have experienced it is more like a shift towards the insight, so calm, abiding insight, kind of as Dora called it, this bridge, and sanghas grow and dharma grows, and it could be just seen as the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha. I always use it like my metaphor is a giant medicine cabinet. And so it's kind of like saying, well, there's probably some folks out there that would like to try this homeopathic remedy. And maybe some really like their multivitamin they've been taking all along. And so we have discussed this a little bit in the program council among teachers, like how do we meet all the levels sitting out there, even right now this morning. There will be someone here who stepped in, and we often have this, it's their first connection to the Dharma. They saw us on the website, and they show up. Then we got someone sitting here who's been here 30 years doing the Mahamudra program. So the Buddha knows.
Or just finished the 3-year retreat.
Yeah, that too. And all of which is wonderful. But we try then to try different things. I just want to talk on that practical level to say, maybe this will help you. And the other thing I think is really worthwhile saying is we do have one-on-one interviews. There's a brochure on the back table. We don't mention them often enough, but there's a brochure back there, and you can meet just one-on-one with any of us, including now Lama Michael, I think. I'm looking at Sally, who keeps his calendar. And you can get a tune-up on your practice. And I love doing those. And I think I've heard from people they are beneficial, because then they can come in and say, get like 5 questions back and forth. And mostly in this kind of setting, no one's comfortable doing that, getting too down. And I see you being sensitive to that. So I encourage that. There was something else I wanted to say. No, I'm not going to throw that out. Okay. But I love your question because, I've sat with it too, like, where are we going now? And the answer to it is, these are only 5 of the 84,000, so relax. It's going to shift and change, and yeah, it's all good. Anything?
Thank you.
Try and get this at the right distance. Well, I just wanted to throw this into the mix. You talked about objectless meditation, and I understand that that may be sort of a more advanced practice compared to some of the more focused types of shamatha, or maybe it's just a different type of practice. But sometimes I've thought about this, that then another instruction, we talked about the instruction of paying attention to your experience, maybe a part of your experience or maybe to all of your experience, and that has been characterized as a tall order, so maybe more advanced. But then there's also another instruction, and Bill, I think you might have mentioned this instruction this morning as well, which is don't do anything. And it has seemed to me that instruction is quite different than pay attention to some aspect of your experience or all of your experience. And so I wondered if you might comment on the difference between paying attention to experience and doing nothing, or just relaxing and doing nothing.
Just. When we were working here, we had this box, and if you said, well, we just can do this, you had to put $1 in for every time you said the word just. We never figured out what happened to the box. When Bokar Rinpoche was here in 1996 for the Mahamudra seminar, one of the quintessential moments was he had gone through the 6 points of Telopa and was trying to point at something. He said, so it's down to it, nothing to do. Nothing to do. Then he said, but is something along the lines that I forget the exact phrasing of how the but piece was phrased, but until you can see what that's about, there's quite a bit to do. There's all the things in the path to do. So this kind of points out the this points out the kind of the role of progressive deepening of awareness of exactly what on earth is going on. Another way to phrase it: what on earth am I doing? And being able to see the doing is actually the path to nothing to do, to the not doing anything. Being able to see the way in which we kind of hold the distortion of reality, kind of where that we can't actually see how to relax the grip. And so along the way, there are lots of methods. And I can feel kind of provisional about using the term advanced. It's, I think, fine as long as we understand it in terms of there are some things that may be easier to do if we've done other things first. That's the only thing that makes them advanced in a certain sense. And they may become a bridge to doing something else that's not easy to do right off the bat. But there isn't any practice where we could not discover right in the middle of it the most profound thing. So from that perspective, I would have to say the word advanced is not helpful. And to the extent that there's an organized, you could say that the path has been organized for us. It's been organized in a way that does offer things that could be easier for some people, and then kind of you sort of take a kind of a statistical approach and say, for the people in the middle of the bell curve at this point in time, maybe this would be an easier place to start, which would then allow something else to open up in the future. So it's really kind of practical like that. What's the way to go about it in the simplest, easiest way? We can do certain things thinking, oh, I should do the thing that's really deep and profound, but the way we approach it becomes excessively complicated and full of a lot of angst and whatnot. So whatever methods that allow us to become kind of more simply and directly aware of our experience, those are the things to cultivate. Whatever, and if we were given a kind of a menu of possibilities, and this is one of the things in the Mahamudra program, is providing a menu which doesn't exactly map to the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but it includes some encouragement to look at different domains of experience. You find those things that give you some traction, kind of something seems kind of workable, you're able to relax into it. And then that becomes a basis for allowing things to settle, to be able to relax into experience, relax into doing less. You could say distorting less, instead of having a good grip and a complete wrench like that. Just ease back to there before we can completely relax on the distortion. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Feel free to say, not at all.
No, I think that answers it pretty well. I mean, I guess I could still ask you, or suggest, or try and interpret what you're saying. Are you suggesting, in terms of the 2 instructions, do nothing and pay attention to some aspect of your experience, that perhaps for many of us, paying attention to some aspect of our experience is somewhat easier to do than to actually do nothing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all kinds of comedy routines are built around people not seeing what they're doing. It's kind of it's good slapstick material. Like running around looking for your car keys while they're in your hand. A great comedian can make a really good comedy scene out of that. But that's what we're doing all the time. We're looking elsewhere for something that's right in front of us that we never lost.
Right. So even probably sometimes when we think we're doing nothing,
Yes. Yeah, that was Boka Rinpoche's point, kind
we're
of.
doing a lot of
yes.
things.
Until you can actually sort of see what it is that you're doing, you won't be able to let go of it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add, I got very caught on that, from your question on that phrase, pay attention. It sounds so active, and that may be part of the difficulty. So I immediately thought, how about sitting down and saying, stop paying attention? And what we're trying to not do, like, which is really difficult for us. We're so human, we're doers, and what we're about, the old joke is, do be, just be. And the recognition seems to not that I have much of a recognition, but I'm hoping, and I work toward it each day, is to, we have to get the doing out of the way. So I really liked your question because I started thinking, wow, we say pay attention. And it sounds like, boy, I really got to do something. And as Bill said, we're doing that all day. Attention, attention, attention. It's just fluttering everywhere. So maybe sit down, stop paying attention to anything sometimes. That's one way into the more open you know. And then know, for me it's quite helpful to know, okay, that's the practice I'm doing. Now I'm going to pay attention to the body sensations or the sound, or and shifting is helpful as long as we know I've shifted, you know, instead of it's just kind of lost in usual patterns. But I really appreciated that. I might want to change saying that for myself. I don't know what changing it to, but it sounds too much like I gotta do stuff, and it's the same stuff I've been doing.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very true about my interpretation of the pay attention or using that language, that it sounds very active and feels very active.
Yeah, I like the one, don't meditate. I sit down to meditate, and I say, and don't meditate, which is one of the 6 directions of Tilopa. Yeah.
So whatever, sometimes with discussions, I find, oh, that was really, seemed really interesting. Then I have to say to myself, well, what was interesting? And it's easy for me to lose some thread or some nugget, some sense of it, without actually taking a moment to bring something to mind that I might actively carry. And so this is an element of when we dedicate at the end of practice. If it was just kind of wishing some nice things after we've done something, that's good. But if we have something that we can more actively engage in that, then maybe there's some more energy there. Some more benefit might come from that. So we can maybe bring something out of today into the rest of our practice and the rest of our life.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Reminder, it's cleaning day.
Yes. Yeah.